Well, it was the clash of the titans that never happened. You know, the stage was set yesterday in Iowa. For the first presidential caucus state, there was a matchup that was supposed to happen, basically, between former President Trump and potential 2024 rival, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Well, weather got in the way, or tornado warning forced Mr. Trump to cancel a rally that he had scheduled in Des Moines. Well, Governor DeSantis, well, the weather didn't stop him. He barnstormed the state. Hello, everyone. Welcome on the Sunday to Fox News Live. I'm Eric Shawn. Hi, Arthel.
Hi, Eric. Hello, everyone. I'm Arthel Neville. Happy Mother's Day. So it was a big day for Governor DeSantis, and of course, he's not officially a 2024 candidate, but is expected to announce very soon. He attended multiple GOP events in the Hawkeye State, met with voters, racked up endorsements, and pitched his agenda. Alexis McAdams, she's live in Sioux City, Iowa now, where the Florida governor spoke last night. And Alexis, I understand you were able to talk to the governor. What did he have to say?
Arthel, Eric, that's right. Good afternoon from Iowa. As we get into exactly what was supposed to be this big face-off, as you mentioned, we had a chance to catch up with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who was slamming the White House on pretty much every policy that they stand behind, focusing in on what's happening at our southern border. Watch. Anything you want to say about the southern border and kind of what you're seeing out there? I know you addressed it just a few minutes ago.
It's a disaster, and it's a man-made disaster with bad policies. And so you obviously are going to continue to have bad things happen because they're not going to change the policy. But it should be shut. The border should just be shut down. I mean, that's what you do. You know, if this were like World War II era, they would have shut that down in 48 hours. Our country does not get things done anymore, and that's something that we're going to need to change.
DeSantis is expected, Arthel, to announce his presidential campaign any day now. And Fox News has confirmed this morning that DeSantis will move his political operation into a new base in downtown Tallahassee. That triggers disclosure requirements with federal officials, so things could be moving faster than we might have thought. He was also in the Hawkeye State this weekend at a series of events. Voters telling us that they don't like where the country is heading and will back whoever can beat President Biden. DeSantis events were packed with conservative supporters here. Former President Donald Trump was also supposed to be in Iowa. They talked about having what they said was going to be a huge rally, but his team said the bad weather forced them to cancel that event. DeSantis then seized on that opportunity. He stopped by in Des Moines right about that time Trump's rally was supposed to be happening. Voters watching both men closely.
Trump's a great candidate, too. I think DeSantis is even better, but that's what the primary is for. You kind of duke it out.
And endorsements right now, Arthel, are rolling in on both sides for both Trump and DeSantis. DeSantis' team telling us that he's now backed by more than 36 GOP legislators just from Iowa alone. And then yesterday, right around that time the rally was supposed to happen, former President Trump's campaign rolling out a long list of supporters, more than 100, Arthel, that they say are local officials in the Hawkeye State who want to see the former president back in the White House. Arthel.
Okay, Alexis McAdams live in Sioux City, Iowa. Thank you. Eric.
Well, as you just saw with Alexis, Governor DeSantis weighing in on the humanitarian crisis at the southern border, saying that the border, as you heard, should be shut down completely to stop the overwhelming influx.
We have every right to have that border secured and not have this disaster unfolding. I'd shut down the border immediately. Why are we letting this happen to our country? It's hurting people. The drugs are pouring into the country.
The U.S. Border Patrol reports detaining more than 67,000 migrants just in the past week. You're looking live in Brownsville, Texas, 11:04 Central Time, of one of the camps where migrants in Brownsville, they're awaiting. You know, even though they have detained many, the Border Patrol says that 16,000 got away. Officials have been bracing for that surge of migrants after Title 42 ended last week. They do say the crush, though, has not been as bad as predicted, but just take a look at that, and there's your answer. Matt Finn, live in El Paso, Texas. Matt, what type of numbers and what are we seeing there on the ground at this hour?
Well, Eric, there's so many numbers tossed around, it's hard to keep track of them all. But the latest numbers from the city of El Paso, where I'm standing, this morning, the city reports that this past week, it released 4,297 migrants into the streets here. And that is the highest number of any calendar week so far this year. So you can look at that as a moderate surge or a spike in numbers this past week. Also, CBP sources tell Fox News that on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, all across the southern border, we saw an all-time high 10,000 plus migrants per day. That's also the highest surge ever for each individual day. And that happened before Title 42 expired on Thursday. So you could look at that also as a potential surge or spike. The numbers really aren't lying. Now, in the past 24 hours, however, migrant encounters have drastically fallen, according to Border Patrol sources. For example, in the Rio Grande sector alone, the chief there tweeted that earlier this week they had 3,000 encounters on Monday alone. Yet in the past 24 hours, that number plummeted to 468. So what can we credit to this drop? Perhaps the state of Texas's physical show of force. For the first time ever, we saw Texas DPS agents physically standing in the way of migrants at the Rio Grande River and telling them to turn around. Also, perhaps cooperation from Mexico and that CBP One app, which allows migrants to be paroled.
The United States Border Patrol has experienced a 50% drop in the number of encounters versus what we were experiencing earlier in the week, before Title 42 ended at midnight on Thursday. It is still early. We are in day 3.
And, we show so many images of migrants crossing, those large groups crossing into the United States, and people ask sometimes, well, what happens to them after they get into the U.S.? Well, here is one example. This is one of the pathways. Right now, here in the streets of downtown El Paso, there are migrants who have been sleeping on the streets, scattered across 2 or 3 city blocks. Now there are charity groups and church organizations that show up during the day and feed them. It looks like they might be setting up for a Sunday church service here as well. I actually communicated with several of these migrants a short while ago using the translator. They tell me they're coming from Colombia and Venezuela. They tell me they want to get to various cities, including New York City, Denver, and Orlando, Florida. The migrants, the group that I talked to, they say that they were all processed and released. One of them showed me their parole paperwork. Of course, I can't independently confirm whether all these migrants are here legally or not, but they say that they want to work for food, the migrants that we were speaking to, and they say they want to get jobs here in the United States. So this is, being called a springboard. This is just the first stop for these migrants, and then they plan on relocating or somehow getting to various locations across the United States. Eric.
Matt, they also get court date appearances. We're here in the court dates in 2027, 2035, a court date a decade from now. What are the chances of someone showing up for that?
Sure. I have been in a kind of monitoring or tracking one migrant from Texas. He ended up in Philadelphia and New York City, and his court date was about 2 years after he arrived into the United States. Now, he says he's going to show up for that court date because he wants to get his working papers. And I'm told, by Border Patrol that if they don't show up for that court date, they will be immediately expelled from this country, meaning if there's any type of traffic stop or if they ever encounter law enforcement moving forward, they have no chance. They will be deported. So if the migrants have any interest in actually legally staying here and working and getting those working papers, they will show up for the court date. But if they don't, then they're probably not going to. So it depends on the individual, of course, Eric.
Yeah, that's the issue. They say many do not show up, of course. Matt Finn.
Sure, the honor system.
Yep. Matt, see how that works. Matt in El Paso, thank you.
Yep.
Marthel?
Eric, thank you. Well, a group of veterans, some suffering from PTSD, may now be victims of New York's migrant busing battle. Fox News confirms 20 homeless vets just got kicked out of several hotels in the suburbs north of Manhattan to make room for those migrants getting bussed in from the city. CB Cotton has more. CB?
Hi, Arthel. New York City's rush to find new shelters for migrants and asylum seekers has displaced another group of people. As you mentioned, veterans. The veterans advocacy group located in the suburbs telling Fox News, in part, our veterans were housed in several hotels that were preparing to receive migrants from New York City. Thankfully, my team and I were able to scramble and find new temporary housing for these veterans. Whether you agree or disagree with migrants being housed in the Hudson Valley, I believe all of us can agree that this issue should not negatively impact our homeless veterans who have sacrificed so much for our country. Now, on Thursday, New York City Mayor Eric Adams sent 2 buses filled with adult single male migrants, 60 in total, to the suburban Orange County. The migrants are voluntary participants in the relocation program, and the city says it's paying for them to have a hotel stay of up to 4 months. Adams also had planned to send migrants to Rockland County, but a Supreme Court judge issued a temporary restraining order blocking the city's move. A city spokesperson telling Fox the city is reviewing its legal options. For now, as Orange County waits to see what happens after the migrants' 4-month hotel stay, its leaders are speaking out about the veterans getting the boot.
In the last couple days since I've spoken to you, brides and grooms and their wedding parties have been kicked out of the hotel in place for these migrants from New York City. 15 veterans were kicked out, combat veterans, Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam veterans that were homeless, and a slew of other people.
That Orange County leader you just heard from did declare a state of emergency, and there's been several lawsuits filed on behalf of the county and one of its towns, all in an attempt to block New York City from housing migrants there. But this is a fluid situation, and for now, the migrants are there. New York City leaders say without more help from the federal government, the state's suburbs have to step up.
We have to coordinate this, city, state, federal level. Right now, that's not happening. So I am asking President Biden to please step up here. Do not ignore New York City.
Now, Arthel, one of the hotels which reportedly evicted the veterans, told the New York Post it hadn't done so, hadn't taken in any migrants, nor had plans to. Arthel.
All right. Thank you very much, CB Cotton, for that report. Eric?
Well, as this is happening, President Biden is spending the weekend at his beach house in Delaware. And the ACLU is saying that the current administration policies, they claim, are no different than the asylum bans under former President Trump. Lucas Thomason live at the White House with the reaction to that and to the latest border developments and what the administration says it is doing. Hey, Lucas.
Hey, Eric. It's Mother's Day, so holiday routine. Holiday for some, routine for others. Now, earlier on Fox News Sunday, Ro Khanna says he blames both parties for the logjam at the border.
I don't believe this is either a Democratic or Republican issue. It's a both-party issue. Nothing has gotten done since President Reagan signed bipartisan immigration reform in 1986.
Now, when Ronald Reagan signed that immigration law into law, there were 3 million illegal immigrants eligible for amnesty. Today, that number is over 11 million. And then there's the looming debt ceiling debate. The GOP-controlled House passed a bill raising the debt ceiling and cutting some spending to last year's levels and limiting to 1% of future increases in spending. Also on Fox News Sunday, Florida Congressman Byron Donald says the Senate and President should sign this into law and keep the government from defaulting on its $31 trillion debt.
If Joe Biden brings nothing to the table, if all he does is sit there with his hands in his pockets and not understanding what he has done and a way to actually negotiate, then he is the one leading our nation into default. And it's a very sad thing to see.
Before leaving for Delaware yesterday, President Biden spoke at Howard University's graduation ceremony here in the nation's capital. He did not mention the border. He warned the graduates about the following.
The most dangerous terrorist threat to our homeland is white supremacy. I'm not saying this because I'm at a black HBCU. I say it wherever I go.
Now, President Biden wants to solve this debt ceiling crisis before he travels to Japan on Wednesday. Otherwise, he might have to potentially sign a bill that's been flown out to the Western Pacific. Eric?
All right, better get that bill to the Western Pacific on that plane. Lucas, thank you. Arthel?
Well, Eric, thank you. Republicans say financial documents subpoenaed by the House Oversight Committee show members of the Biden family got millions of dollars from foreign entities. Now, some payments allegedly made while President Biden was vice president. The White House says those records do not connect President Biden to any wrongdoing. Let's bring in now Congressman Tim Burchett. He's Republican from Tennessee, and he sits on the House Oversight and Foreign Affairs Committees. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us. And let me jump right in, because you probably are well aware that White House spokesman Ian Sams is on record saying that, quote, there's no evidence of any wrongdoing. And he adds that House Republicans are microwaving old debunked stuff. And that's a quote as well. So, Congressman Burchett, can you provide evidence of a direct link of wrongdoing to the president?
Yes, ma'am. There's over 10 million reasons of wrongdoing. The most telling one to me is there's 1 million. Everybody's talking about the Chinese connection, and that's important because I feel like this White House has been completely compromised by the communist Chinese. But the Romanian one is of interest to me because at the very time when then Vice President Joe Biden was lecturing Romania on ethics, he and his crime family were receiving over $1 million from a Romanian individual who was actually under investigation for corruption. Just the arrogance of this family is beyond belief. They set up over 20 LLCs during his reign of terror as vice president, and then they filtered that $10 million through that.
Congressman, let me ask you this. Why is the Hunter Biden case problematic to our country?
Well, for many reasons. It's because we have communications that say 10% for the big guy. Joe Biden was receiving this. 9 Biden family members, grandchildren were receiving, kids, minors, receiving money. Why were they receiving money of countries that the president, then vice president, was directly visiting at the time and this country was involved in negotiations with? To me, it shows a complete compromise of our power. And the fact that the FBI now, when we have a whistleblower coming forward, the FBI is doing everything to block it, to me shows the complete weaponization of the FBI. Ma'am, when the Biden family went to mob school, I believe they fell asleep during the money laundering because it is very clear where the money's coming from, the communist Chinese and many of our enemies across this world, and it flows right into their bank accounts. There's a clear, direct line there. And for the FBI not to pay any attention to it, they went after George Santos, and he's relatively small potatoes in the scheme of things. But yet, when it turns out to be the president of the United States' involvement and his family in crime enterprises, then they seem to turn their head. So we've got a real problem. I salute Speaker McCarthy for getting with Director Wray. I think they're going to be talking this Thursday. I would hope that Director Wray understands that Congress.
Let me get back to Director Wray in a moment, but I do want to mention this: that absolutely, according to the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, on record, Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump made up to $640 million while her father was in office, and they were official advisors to the president. If you would explain to our viewers why the Hunter Biden scenario is different.
Well, during the Trump administration, those transactions were not hidden. They're on bank forms. There was not violations filed because of that. That was business dealings that they were doing, and they are business people. Whether it was, I think that it should be looked at as well. But if there were no violations, where there are clear violations in the Biden administration, this is a Democrat-controlled organization that issued these violations, ma'am. So I think that draws a direct line to the corruption that's involved there.
So if the problem is corruption and compromise, wouldn't any income of that substantial amount be problematic for our country while someone is in office and their family members are receiving those sorts of payments?
I think so. There should be no stone left unturned, but apparently this is one that they refuse to even look at. So I think that shines a straight light right at the Biden administration currently. And if the Trump administration, bring it forward. If the Democrats have something, bring it forward. They control all the investigative bodies in Washington. Why are they not bringing it forward if there is, in fact, something there?
You mentioned Director Wray. FBI rejected, as you well know, a subpoena from the House Oversight Committee, your committee, for a document request that you and fellow GOP lawmakers say lays out an alleged criminal scheme, that's another quote, involving President Biden and a foreign national. So what do you say to Democrats and supporters of President Biden who might see this as a political witch hunt?
I would say there's nothing wrong with transparency. Let's put all the cards on the table. Let's look at everything. Let's look at this. And when the FBI does this kind of thing, I mean, it goes back in the history of our country. Every time they delay something, they give redacted reports. I mean, they have a history of this kind of behavior. You can't even get the full reports.
It happens in this. Yeah, I understand. We'll keep it current. I get your point on record there in history, because, listen, there is some rebuffs, if you will, during this administration, the previous administration. So I'm not sure but that's your job as the House Oversight and Accountability Committee to make sure that everything's on the up and up. So I know you're working on this, and you'll continue to, and hopefully we'll get all the real answers. And we do appreciate your time here today. Tennessee Congressman Tim Burchett, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, ma'am.
Take care.
Well, the 4 Idaho University students who were murdered last year at that off-campus house, remember that horrible... there was a touching tribute to the 4 University of Idaho students who were brutally murdered 6 months ago. Their school awarding them all posthumous degrees as part of this weekend's commencement ceremonies. Meantime, the murder suspect, Bryan Kohberger, he remains behind bars, awaiting a preliminary hearing next month on the 4 counts of murder that he faces. Jeff Paul, following the very latest on the story, and joins us live. Hi, Jeff.
Yeah, Eric, a tough school year coming to an end for students at the University of Idaho. The usual time of celebration for graduates is bittersweet as they not only remember the students who were killed, but honor them. The University of Idaho awarding posthumous degrees to the families of Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, both seniors, when they were murdered. The university also providing certificates for the families of Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin. Now, during a ceremony this weekend, Kaylee's family walked across the stage. They received a bachelor's degree in general studies on her behalf. Madison's parents were also at the university on Saturday for the graduation ceremonies. They, too, walked onto the stage to accept her posthumous bachelor's degree in marketing.
Madison's family will always be members of the Vandal family. So thank you for joining us today to celebrate her academic achievements and contributions to the University of Idaho.
The 4 students were stabbed to death in their off-campus home after a night out roughly 6 months ago. After an extensive search, authorities arrested 28-year-old Bryan Kohberger 6 weeks after the killings. While the case is just in the beginning stages of the legal process, former FBI Director Louis Freeh urged students to remember the 4 killed for their strength and inspiration.
The loss of Ethan, Xana, Kaylee, and Madi will remain in your hearts and minds for the rest of your journey. The strength and inspiration of their life accomplishments and their family's devotion and courage is now an inseparable part of you as you go forward.
The off-campus house where the murders took place is set to be demolished as a healing step. The suspect, meanwhile, Bryan Kohberger, hasn't entered a plea just yet, but a preliminary hearing is scheduled for the end of June. Eric?
All right, Jeff. Thank you. Arthel?
Eric, well, the family of Daniel Penny speaking out after he was charged in the chokehold death of Jordan Neely will have their reaction plus legal analysis on the case. That's up next. Friends and family of Daniel Penny, the 24-year-old Marine veteran charged with killing a homeless man on the subway, now speaking out. They claim, quote, he was railroaded for his part in Jordan Neely's death. A defense fund set up by his legal team so far raising $1.6 million. Alexandria Hoff has more now. Alexandria?
Hi, Arthel. Yeah, the volume of support that was coming in actually led to the platform Give, Send, Go going offline briefly after getting overwhelmed. It reads on there that any funds that exceed the legal bills needed will be donated to a mental health advocacy program in New York City. Now, Penny is currently free on $100,000 bond after turning himself in on Friday in connection to the May 1st death of Jordan Neely. Neely died after Penny held him in a chokehold. Witnesses say that the former Marine jumped into action on the subway to subdue the 30-year-old homeless man who had been acting erratically and threatening passengers. Here's Penny's attorney.
He didn't enter the subway seeking to, harm anyone. He didn't enter the subway seeking to attack anyone. He was really putting himself in harm's way for the benefit of others.
Now, on the second-degree manslaughter charge, Penny's cousin Justine Baldwin told the New York Post, "It's disgusting. Here's a young man who served our country. He's a handsome, fun kid who could always be counted on when you needed help." And childhood friend Devin Marino said Danny was always fun and goofy and never harmed anyone, adding he was always super inclusive. But the family of Jordan Neely feel that Penny intended to cause Neely's death and that the charge should be murder, not second-degree manslaughter. An attorney for Neely's family said last week that people on the train should have simply lent a helping hand. Now, Neely did have over 40 prior arrests, and according to the New York Times, Neely's behavior had become so severe in recent years that the city had placed him on a watch list of 50 homeless individuals with untreated psychosis who had refused help. Arthel.
Alexandria Hoff. Thank you, Alexandria. Eric?
Arthel, the Neely case causing lots of controversy over the legal questions regarding bystander intervention. This while the Speaker of the New York City Council was blaming Neely's killing on systemic racism. Civil rights attorney Richard St. Paul joins us now, also a member of the Republican Trial Lawyers Association. Richard, welcome. But first, on the case itself, the manslaughter charge that Maureen Daniel Penny faces. Do you think that manslaughter is justified, or as the Neely family is demanding, should he be charged with murder?
Well, look, I think the best charge the prosecution saw, and I do agree with this, is that manslaughter. I think that is the path toward that the prosecution has in order to convict him of a particular crime. If you charge murder, then you have to prove intent. And I don't know that the prosecution or anyone is able to show that that Neely intended to kill, Penny intended to kill Neely. And I think that's the biggest obstacle. With the manslaughter charges, it's a matter of whether or not the behavior was reckless. Perhaps the chokehold was just too long. And the second element there is it actually caused the person's death. The reckless behavior caused the person's death.
Yeah, Penny's attorneys are saying he was protecting himself, self-defense, protecting the people in the car. Would that wash over and make it with the jury potentially? Would a jury look at that and say, look, he tried to subdue him and it just went too far, tragically?
That's absolutely going to be one of the best defenses to offer. There's a number of defenses. One, you didn't do it. Clearly, we know he did it. Two, was an accident. We're way beyond an accident here. The third is defense of others and self-defense. Those are all in the same category. And certainly the behavior, the erratic behavior, possible criminal convictions could come into place. Neely's past criminal convictions. In addition to that, whether or not there were passengers who felt threatened. So there's going to be eyewitnesses are going to be key to the defense on this, whether or not they felt threatened that Neely was going to attack them. And therefore, Penny, a Marine veteran, jumped in to act on behalf of others. That's going to be a strong defense for Penny.
So you're saying in this case, the defense, Penny's defense, can bring up Neely's arrest record, arrested about 40 times, including charged with hitting another subway rider in the face, hitting a 67-year-old woman, breaking her eye socket and breaking her nose, that a jury could hear Neely's criminal history?
They could hear the criminal history based upon bad prior acts, all right, similar situations, and mainly convictions. So, yes, there is a possibility the criminal record will come out and also his mental health record come out. If I'm the defense attorney for Penny, I'm going to bring that up. At the same time, the prosecution is going to try to keep that out because they're going to want to make this a case about the reckless behavior, regardless, whatever Penny's actions were. I mean, whatever Neely had going on, Penny's actions were reckless. So you're going to have that big fight. There's going to be a lot of motions here, and I think this is going to go to trial. It's going to go to a jury because there's a lot at play. Obviously, Penny has $1.6 million in the legal defense fund. So this is just going to go out to a jury for sure. There's a lot of narratives at play here. There's black versus white, conservative versus liberal. There's high crime and the narrative of high crime in the city and the city subways. There's a lot of narratives going in, but it really boils down to, was Penny acting on behalf of others, and whether a jury will believe that in order for him to be acquitted.
You talk about black versus white and the racial aspect to this. Let me read you what Adrienne Adams is, the Speaker of the New York City Council. A statement from her. There are two parts to this. First has to do with racism. Here's what she has said, quote, "Systemic racism that robs us of our basic humanity and life and death should no longer be denied after being on full display for the past 11 days. This should be an inflection point for our city to focus on ensuring New Yorkers have access to the essential services needed to be healthy and safe, and we make budget investments and policy changes necessary to achieve this." First of all, her view that Neely died because of systemic racism. Yeah. Do you subscribe to that?
we've got to stop that narrative of race here in this particular situation, because there are a lot of other things that are placed that come before race. Just because Penny happened to be white and Neely had to be black, what really happens here, and Penny was arrested. So those who say, oh well, he got away with this as white, no, he was arrested. So let's kill that narrative. But really, it boils down to a mental health issue and what the city is doing to keep people out of the subways who have mental health. This could have been prevented is key. And politicians who make irresponsible statements about race, it's just not responsible. It clearly is not responsible. This has nothing to do with race and everything to do with mental health and people who have mental health issues being allowed to walk freely on the subway.
And what's so shocking, actually surprising, and actually, quite frankly, insulting to the taxpayers of New York and the citizens of New York City, is she says that they want to ensure that New Yorkers have access to the essential services. They've got to make the budget investments. This city spends billions of dollars a year on this. Neely was known to the system. He was on the list of 50 of the most critical homeless people with mental health issues. He had been in and out of the system many, many times. The system is failing. The industrial complex, homeless, mental health industrial complex is failing the most vulnerable, those who need help the most. And tragically, the end result is what we saw with Neely. So what would you say to Adrienne Adams? She's budgeting all this, and this whole system is and you see these tragic incidences happen.
Classic example of throwing stones in a glass house here. I mean, if I'm the Neely family, I'm looking at the city of New York to see if there is more that they could have done to prevent his death. There is a civil liability here, too. The Neely family can look at the city of New York and see if they were negligent in this. They can also sue Mr. Penny for wrongful death there. So there's going to be a civil aspect of this. I think this is going to be something that we're going to be watching for some time here. But one thing I can say is that as a New Yorker, we've got to stop and take account of what we're doing to combat mental illness and crime in this city.
And the mentally ill, those who need help, should get it. Richard St. Paul. Richard, thank you for joining us and for your insight on this disturbing case.
Thank you, Eric.
One of Daniel Penny's attorneys, Stephen Razor, will be speaking out on this. He'll be with Judge Jeanine on the 5. That's tomorrow, 5 p.m. 5 on the 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Fox News Channel. Arthel?
The man suspected in the disappearance of Natalee Holloway nearly 20 years ago, now facing extradition to the U.S. His lawyer tells Fox News he could face additional charges. Ted Williams covered this case from the beginning, and he joins us next with his analysis.
Dragon and Slayer have evolved. Convinced of the inevitability. Super Creep ถูกส่งออกไปแล้ว
Your tower has been destroyed. An ally has been defeated.
The abyss is just underneath.
An ally has been defeated. An enemy has been defeated. Enemy ultimate.
Oh,
Enemy double kill. Your tower has been destroyed.
ก็ตึงอยู่ดอกครบ
เขาว่าตึง
ป้อมเลนกลางของเรา
Your
ถูก
tower
โจม
has
ตี
been destroyed.
The stars shall guide you. Dark Slayer has been defeated. The boundless galaxy contains infinite beauty. Significant lives.
Shut down.
ศัตรูเรียกดาร์คสเลเยอร์ออกมาแล้ว
An ally ally has been defeated. Double kill.
Nice assisting.
มังกร
Olympian Steel.
Their indulgence of conviction solely serves their mindlessness.
Ultimate.
Is just underneath.
Your team has destroyed a tower. You have been defeated. An ally has been defeated. An enemy has been defeated. Double kill.
เหลือน้อยแล้ว
Triple kill. Shut down. An enemy has been defeated.
The stars shall guide you.